Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 186. Another encounter with Wang Tungfei. The Song clan was one of the three great clans of the southern domain, and was somewhat isolated in its position. It had a history stretching back tens of thousands of years, and was deeply rooted in the society of the southern domain. It existed on the edge of a wide plain which contained some rolling hills, but few mountains. In the southeast of the plain, however, was a mountain range called Neck of Heaven, under which flowed a river. Look down on it from the sky, and it had the appearance of a woman resting her head on her arm. It was quite pretty and charming. The Song clan was situated atop the chain of mountains. It was different from other clans. Its main gate was actually an ancient castle, connected to which was an enormous wall that snaked throughout the various surrounding mountains, creating a very spectacular sight. As for the castle of the capital city, it was pitch black and had the appearance of an enormous wild beast, filled with indescribable ferocity. Anyone who saw it for the first time would be left with the impression that the Song clan was not to be provoked. The capital city was surrounded by 81 smaller cities, which were constructed according to the rise and fall of the mountains. Each city was densely populated by clan members. In the sky above the Song clan was an enormous rotating sun and moon. When it was pitch black in the outside world, the sun blazed in the Song clan. When it was bright and sunny outside, the moon shone in the Song clan. This sun and moon was a precious treasure of the Song clan. Every great sect and clan possessed some valuable treasure. Only in this way could their continued status and glory be maintained. For example, the Black Sieve sect had their incense burner, and the Solitary Sword sect its enormous sword. They were all precious treasures. As for the Song clan, the sun and moon which hung in their sky enveloped the entire clan, transforming it into a different world than what existed outside. It was likely because of this treasure that for so many years, the Song clan had not experienced any friction with outside sects and clans, and held such a lofty position. They did not provoke others, and others did not dare to provoke them. The Song clan was not as powerful as the Solitary Sword sect, nor as mysterious as the Blood Demon sect. It was not as extravagant as the Violet Fate sect, nor did they have a vast array of magics like the Golden Frost sect. They were not as erudite as the Black Sieve sect, either. Amongst the three great clans, the Song clan maintained the lowest profile. Their Dao children did not perform sensational acts, nor did the clan struggle for glory. They were relatively quiet. What they did have, though, was information, collected over many, many years. They did not provoke others, and others did not dare to provoke them. The mountains they occupied left others with a profound impression. If incredible change rocked the southern domain in the future, other sects and clans might very well collapse. The one organization that was most likely to remain was the Song clan. The degree of their inconspicuousness was such that people knew almost nothing about them. This in turn created a sense of fear and terror. In the past few hundred years, the only person to venture out of the Song clan was Eccentric Song. 1. Eccentric Song was the guy with the treasure mountain which Meng Hao looted to death. If you want a refresher on that, check out Chapter 48, Eccentric Song and Wu Dingqiu and subsequent chapters, who everyone in the southern domain knew about. He had an odd personality, and enjoyed the collection of wild beasts. His occasional excursions gave him plenty of opportunities to interact with other sects and clans. At this moment within the Song clan capital city, dazzling lights flickered and people bustled about preparing for an ancient tradition of the Song clan. Women of the Song clan were not permitted to marry outsiders. Instead, a husband would be sought from the outside, who would then marry into the family. Upon marriage, the new son-in-law would then become a conclave cultivator of the Song clan. Throughout the years, many sects had desired to infiltrate the Song clan. However, because of their strange and ancient marriage custom, those sects had long since vanished. The Song clan, however, still remained. Of course, there were problems with the arrangement. Song Jiao. 2. Song Jiao was one of the other competitors in the Blood Immortal Legacy tournament. Her last appearance was in Chapter 130, The Perfect Foundation, stood quietly at the window, looking out. The outside world was awash with sunlight, but inside the Song clan, the sky was dark. Wind blew against her face, lifting up her hair and revealing her spectacular beauty. Right now, she wore a sad look and seemed to be apprehensive. Her apprehension was because of her fate as a woman of the Song clan. She felt melancholy for the same reason. There was nothing she could do to resist. It was useless to struggle. The Song clan's rules had been laid down by the ancestors, and could not be changed. The soft voice of a woman could be heard from behind her. We're different from the other sects and clans. As a girl of the Song clan, it's impossible to maintain your purity forever. You can't change that, nor can I. The voice belonged to a middle-aged woman who gazed affectionately at Song Jiao. Song Jiao didn't reply. After a while, though, she nodded. In her mind, images appeared from the Blood Immortal Legacy tournament. She remembered looking on helplessly as her blood phoenix died. She could only watch through tear-filled eyes as it faded away. Perhaps it's just my fate. Her face filled with exhaustion. The exhaustion did not mar her good looks. In fact, it seemed to give birth to a tender beauty. The woman behind her could sense what Song Jiao was feeling. She stepped forward and stroked Song Jiao's long, beautiful hair. It is fate, she said. But it's not destiny, it's a mission. A mission from the Song clan of the Southern Domain. 3. This part contains a play on words of sorts in Chinese. The characters for fate, destiny, and mission are Ming, Mingyun, and Suming respectively. As you can see, they all share the same component, the character Ming, which can have different meanings depending on the context or the other characters it's paired with. The destruction of the Southern Domain. Gather 100 clans. Fuse their bloodlines. Evade the palace of the heavens. Song Jiao murmured the words which she had heard people recite ever since she was young. But father said that no power within the entire Southern Domain could bring about its complete destruction. Nothing in the eastern lands could do so either. She looked back at the middle-aged woman. That's a legend which has existed since ancient times. Mother doesn't know what it means either. Mother and daughter were silent for a while after that. Meanwhile, outside of the Song clan, the sun blazed brightly in the sky. On the plains below the Song clan, a glittering light shined out, which grew in intensity over the space of about 10 breaths. Then, it gradually disappeared, revealing a dozen or more people. Meng Hao sucked in a deep breath and rubbed the bridge of his nose. It seemed his body wasn't really suited for teleportation. He looked around and immediately noticed that up ahead existed a world of darkness. There was a huge mountain range, hanging over which was a moon. He gaped at the bizarre sight. Next to him, Chen Fan sighed with emotion. We're in Song clan territory now. It's my first time here, but I've heard people talk of how astonishing the Song clan is. The old man lifted his gourd of alcohol and took a drink. Then he let out a loud burp and laughed heartily. His laughter filled the air, after which several beams of light shot out from the darkness of the Song clan. Brandy nose, said a voice from within the approaching beams of light. It didn't sound pleased. How come the solitary sword sect sent you? I can smell the stench of alcohol coming off of you from here. Eccentric Song. How could I not come? This old daoist is going to drink his fill before he leaves. The old man suddenly shot up into the air. Meng Hao took a deep breath. The words eccentric Song filled him with fear. He looked up into the sky and could just make out the image of Song clan members within the beams of light. One of them was an old man who, although Meng Hao had never seen before, he immediately knew was the same eccentric Song from that time in the state of Zhao. I just arrived and already ran into him, thought Meng Hao. I can't stay here long. If eccentric Song finds out I'm here, the consequences will be terrible. Meng Hao was just about to try to sneak off when Chen Fan grabbed him. Little junior brother, did you see? I'm not sure of the name of that member of the elder generation, but I heard everyone calls him eccentric Song. They say he has a very bizarre personality, and that he owns tons of wild beasts. He also likes to make bets with other sects all the time. Meng Hao interrupted him with a forced smile. Elder brother, I really can't proceed any further, I have to. Before Meng Hao could finish speaking, the old man from the solitary sword sect and eccentric Song suddenly started yelling at each other. Your Song clan is entirely too stingy. 10,000 Trees Mountain only has a single pearl as the reward? What good is a crappy pearl? That's the prize that my solitary sword sect kids are supposed to fight for? No way. It's a cubic pearl that can dispel even the strangest poisons in the world, replied eccentric Song. It's a treasure refined by the sun and moon of the Song clan. It can only be given as a gift to a son-in-law of the Song clan. Even if you wanted it, you couldn't have it. Besides, what treasures could possibly compare to a girl of the Song clan? Your granny. Are you solitary sword sect people here because of the search for a son-in-law, or just to grab treasures? Hearing this exchange, Meng Hao's eyes flickered. Next to him, Chen Fan frowned. Little junior brother, you should really think things through, he said earnestly. You'll be able to make a lot of friends here. Li Fuguei will be here too, and you haven't seen him for years. However, if you truly must leave, then elder brother won't stop you. Meng Hao lowered his head thoughtfully for a moment, then looked up and smiled. Fine, since I'm here, I might as well check things out. Chen Fan smiled in return. He clapped Meng Hao on the shoulder and was just about to continue speaking when another blinding light appeared. It spread out, attracting the attention of everyone, including eccentric Song and the old man from the solitary sword sect. The glowing light spread out, and within, the figures of dozens of people gradually grew distinct. Meng Hao's eyes glittered, and Chen Fan frowned. These were people from the Wang clan. The group was comprised of both men and women. They looked around after they appeared, and their eyes were especially drawn to the mountain chain in the distance, upon which the Song clan was situated. At the front of this group of people was an old man whose face was covered with a tranquil expression. He strode forward, looking up at eccentric Song and the old man from the solitary sword sect. Fellow Daoist fan, he said, you arrived quickly. Could it be that you caught a whiff of the Song clan's alcohol, causing you to arrive faster than everyone else? Elder Fan laughed and took a swig of alcohol. I'm not that fast. At least, I'm not as fast as fellow Daoist Wang was that time back at the Rebirth Cave. The speed and beauty of your retreat were incredible. The old man from the Wang clan smiled. He didn't respond, but clasped his hands and gave a slight bow to eccentric Song. Behind him were various members of the Wang clan, including Wang Tengfei, 4. If you want a quick refresher on some key events regarding Wang Tengfei, you can check out Chapter 24, Who Was It? Chapter 32, This Finger Brought Me Humiliation, Today, I Cripple It. Chapter 33, Is This Sword Yours Too? He wore a white robe, along with a cold expression and a slight, grim frown. It seemed as if he were thinking about something important. His features were handsome, his disposition perfect. Everything melded together to give him an air of flawlessness. Standing next to him was Wang Shifan, 5. Wang Shifan is Wang Tengfei's Dao protector, who almost killed Meng Hao. He was introduced in Chapter 35, I'm Not Willing, and also appeared in Chapter 119, The Legacy Shocks the Southern Domain. His expression was proud and aloof as he gazed at the Song clan mountains. Then his gaze shifted to the group from the solitary sword sect. He frowned when he caught sight of Meng Hao. He looks a bit familiar. His gaze passed by before he could recall who Meng Hao was. However, it was at this moment that Wang Tengfei's surprised eyes fell onto Meng Hao. A look of disbelief appeared. Meng Hao looked back at him. They were in different groups of people, hundreds of meters away from each other, and yet their gazes locked. Just like they had years ago in the Reliance sect. Chapter 187, Good Old Fatty Meng Hao, thought Wang Tengfei, his eyes instantly shining with a mysterious glow. He felt a sudden stab of pain from the index finger of his right hand. The finger was pitch black, and inside, a pulsating black aura could be seen. Seeing Meng Hao here was not something Wang Tengfei had ever imagined would happen. Many years had passed, but he recognized him immediately. This was that damned cultivator from the state of Jiao who had stolen away his legacy and wrecked all of his meticulously laid plans. As soon as he saw Meng Hao, Wang Tongfei's breath quickened. He had assumed that Meng Hao disappeared along with the state of Jiao. How could he have predicted that he would suddenly appear here? Furthermore, he was in a group from the solitary sword sect. Many thoughts ran through his head during the space of a few breaths. Then he recovered his composure and looked away. Since he's here, thought Wang Tongfei, I'll have to find an opportunity to sacrifice him to my poison finger. His expression calm, he slowly began to exhibit the same disregard for Meng Hao that he had years ago. It was as if he would eternally be above Meng Hao. It didn't matter if they were in the state of Jiao or the southern domain. He didn't care at all about Meng Hao. He was a member of the Wang clan. He was chosen. He was superior, and as for Meng Hao, it didn't matter what relationship he had with the solitary sword sect. To him, Meng Hao was nothing more than an insect. He had perfect good looks and a flawless temperament. He stood there, slowly becoming the center of attention. He smiled lightly, his expression indifferent. The disregard for Meng Hao which existed in his heart slowly transformed into scorn and arrogance. He tilted his head up, and it appeared, for all intents and purposes, that Meng Hao was nothing to him and could be crushed on a whim. At the same time, Wang Shifan frowned slightly. He looked at Meng Hao again, and a mysterious look appeared in his eyes. A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. It was a smile similar to Wang Tongfei's, filled with scorn and disregard. Now he remembered the scene from years ago. He remembered this ant that he almost crushed on the top of the east mountain of the Reliance sect, only to be stopped by He Luohua. Interesting, he said with a chuckle. His words did not echo out, and could only be heard by Wang Tongfei. So, we once again run into this insolent kid. Tongfei, now is your chance to conclude matters from all those years ago. Kill him, and prove that everything I've told you is true. You are chosen, and he is nothing more than an insect. Wang Tongfei smiled. I've long since stopped thinking about the things that happened that year, he said coolly. However, I really should take his head. He looked at Meng Hao once again, and his eyes brimmed with confidence in his ability to kill him. It would be as easy as turning over his hand. He looked away, ignoring Meng Hao and staring off into the distance. He appeared thoughtful once again, as if he were wrestling with some matter in his heart. Don't overthink things, said Wang Shifan, his voice low. You need to trust Chu Yuyan. Wang Tongfei was quiet for a long moment, then growled, if I ever find out who it was, I'll tear him into 1,000 pieces. His eyes were filled with cold, callous hatred, as well as humiliation. Killing intent roiled out of him, much more intense than when he had seen Meng Hao. This matter was something he could not ignore, something he could not cool down from. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. Seeing Wang Tongfei here wasn't completely unexpected. However, it naturally caused various emotions to bubble up within him. The enmity between him and Wang Tongfei was not something he cared much about anymore. Years had passed, and as of now, Meng Hao actually felt that he had been a bit too hot-blooded in his youth. There were definitely some areas in which he was in the wrong. Now, Meng Hao's cultivation base was at the mid-foundation establishment stage, and his battle prowess put him in the same league as Dao children, although few people knew that. In Meng Hao's estimation, if he could defeat Wang Tongfei when in the Qi condensation stage, then nowadays it wasn't even worth thinking about. What concerned him most was the Song clan's search for a husband, and the cubic pearl that eccentric Song had mentioned moments ago. It could dispel the strangest poisons in the world, and that made Meng Hao's heart palpitate with eagerness. He wasn't sure if the cubic pearl could dispel the poison of the resurrection lily, but considering the Song clan was offering it up as a prize, it was surely no ordinary object. I wonder if it really can dispel the poison. If it can, then maybe I won't need to infiltrate the Violet Fate sect after all. Staying in the solitary sword sect wouldn't be bad. His heart pounded in anticipation. As he traveled the path of cultivation, his next big hurdle would be core formation. That was a difficult bridge to cross, and joining a powerful sect would surely help. After a long moment of thought, his eyes filled with determination. Up above, eccentric Song, Elder Fan, and the nascent soul cultivator from the Wang clan turned into beams of prismatic light that shot toward the darkness which surrounded the Song clan. 2 other Song clan members had come out with eccentric song. They split, one walking toward the solitary sword sect's group, the other to the Wang clan's group. They clasped hands and bowed. Smiling, they said, "Fellow Taoists of the solitary sword sect and Wang clan, please follow us. We will enter the mountains of the Song clan together." Everyone flew up into the air. Various members of the solitary sword sect and the Wang clan were obviously acquainted. The 2 groups merged into a larger group. Talking and laughing could be heard as they transformed into beams of light and shot toward the Song clan. Meng Hao and Chen Fan were on the edge of the group, some distance away from the Wang clan cultivators. Wang Tongfei flew along, expression cold. He frowned, apparently too busy being lost in thought to pay any attention to Meng Hao. They flew at high speed, and very soon reached the area where the brightness of the outside world gave way to the darkness of the Song clan. The instant they entered, Meng Hao's heart leaped. He had just discovered a major difference between the outside world and the Song clan. The spiritual energy here could be felt and absorbed. This unexpected turn of events shook Meng Hao's mind and heart. Of course, after all his years of practicing cultivation, he was able to prevent his feelings from showing on his face. His expression was the same as ever. So it turns out, I can absorb spiritual energy in this place. This is the perfect location for me to practice cultivation. This discovery exceeded the entirety of Meng Hao's imagination. He was just preparing to rotate his cultivation base and begin to absorb spiritual energy when a thought flashed through his mind, and he stopped. One of the tools which Meng Hao had developed after escaping all the various snares and traps throughout the years was caution. Therefore, he would be cautious here, too. He looked around and soon began to pick up on some clues. As the solitary sword sect disciples flew forward, frowns appeared on their faces. "So, we can't absorb the spiritual energy here," Chen Fan whispered to him. "I heard before that the Song clan is strange, and that certainly seems true. Apparently, only members of the Song clan can do breathing exercises here to absorb spiritual energy. Other sects and clans are unable to. It's not that spiritual energy is forbidden here, it's that we can't absorb it." A bit more time passed. Seeing all the mountains and cities filled with cultivators pass by beneath him, Meng Hao was filled with a sense of mystery. After passing scores of mountains, they reached the Song clan's capital city. Within the capital city was an enormous square. Already, many cultivators from outside the Song clan had arrived there. Present were members of the Golden Frost sect and the Blood Demon sect. The place was alive with activity, and the hubbub of conversations filled the air. Even before the solitary sword sect and Wang clan cultivators could land, a loud voice drifted up into the air. "It's absolutely, 100% true. Judea, 1. Judea, of course, is the guy who saw Meng Hao and Chu Yuan together, which happened in chapter 136. Judea, saw everything with my own eyes. That day, Chu Yuan wasn't wearing proper clothing. She was wearing a man's garment. Furthermore, she seemed to be on very intimate terms with the male cultivator. You all don't believe me? I, Judea, swear an oath that if my words are in any way false, you can gouge my eyes out." The person talking was a young cultivator. He was speaking so passionately that spit flew out of his mouth. He gazed at the surrounding Song clan members with exuberant, shining eyes. As he spoke, he gesticulated wildly and jumped up and down. The dozens of surrounded Song clan members watched on in astonishment. The cultivators from the Blood Demon sect were situated off to the side. They sat there quietly, cross-legged, and in their midst was a Li Shiqi, too. Li Shiqi is the Blood Demon sect Dao child who appeared in chapter 175, Li Shiqi, dressed in a white robe. Sitting cross-legged next to Li Shiqi were 2 people. One was Sang Luo's brother, and the other was none other than Wang Youcai, 3. Wang Youcai was one of the group of 4 young people brought to the Reliance sect in chapter 1. The others in the group were Meng Hao, Fatali Fugui, and Little Tiger Dong Hu. Wang Youcai's last appearance was in chapter 130, The Perfect Foundation. Wang Youcai was looking quietly at the group of people from the Golden Frost sect. In their midst was a rather fat fellow whose face had a few pimples on it. He wasn't very tall, and at the moment he was smiling complacently at Judea. This was none other than Li Fugui. When the two of them had run into each other earlier, Fatty found, to his surprise, that Wang Youcai responded coldly to his attempts to start a conversation and even pretended not to know him. At the moment, he wasn't sure what to think, and could only sigh inwardly. You simply can't imagine the expression on Chu Yuyen's face, continued Judea. I guess you can only say that it was wonderful. And that male cultivator, well, he was extraordinarily handsome, a dragon amongst men. Really. They embraced each other and exchanged some sweet words. As their hands groped each other frantically, they began to pant. As he spoke, Judea got more excited. Li Fugui suddenly cleared his throat and spoke out in a loud and clear voice. I can bear witness to this, he said, as I was also present. Ari, at first I planned to go give them a piece of my mind. As all of you fellow Taoists are well aware, fellow Daoist Chu Yuyen is the beloved of fellow Daoist Wang Tengfei. And of course, fellow Daoist Wang Tengfei and I are the closest of friends. Therefore, when I saw what was happening, I wanted to speak my mind. However, Ari, you have no way to know how the two of them looked. It was clear that the feelings between them were true love. As his voice rang out, the faces of the Song clan members all filled with strange expressions. They knew Fatty, of course. He was a member of the Golden Frost sect that no one dared to provoke. He was a treasure of the sect, and as such, his level of seniority was extremely high. Anyone who offended him would arouse the wrath of the entire Golden Frost sect. To do so would be similar to rubbing a cat's hair backward. This was because the Golden Frost sect had 18 bloodline legacies. By combining their power, the sect could wield the power of a great Tao reserve spell. According to the rumors, the power of this spell was so incredible that it could slay immortals. However, for many years, the sect only possessed 17 of the bloodlines. The last one had disappeared, and no matter how hard the Golden Frost sect searched, it could not be found. There was no one who the legacy could be passed on to. Therefore, for many years, the ultimate power of the Golden Frost sect spell could not be unleashed. However, it turned out Li Fugui was perfectly suited to accept the legacy. Therefore, he was treated as a treasure of the sect. Usually, the sect priest would treat him very amiably and was very protective of him. You could essentially say that the entire sect was at his beck and call. Furthermore, Fatty didn't like to practice cultivation, nor did he want an assigned Tao protector. So to protect him, whenever he went out, a large group of Golden Frost sect disciples would accompany him. The sect was extremely worried that something might happen to him. The most extreme thing that had happened was that once after someone provoked Li Fugui, the sect priest personally slaughtered an entire sect. Afterwards, he issued a proclamation in the southern domain that anyone who dared to even touch Li Fugui would provoke the unbridled fury of the entire Golden Frost sect. Chapter 188. True love is priceless. Actually, Li Fugui was diametrically opposed to Wang Tengfei, and wouldn't let him off the hook for anything. Normally, whether he was inside the sect or outside, he constantly said sarcastic things about him. This, of course, made Wang Tengfei furious. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Offending Li Fugui was not an option. Their feud was a trifling matter of the junior generation. Furthermore, Li Fugui was too important to the Golden Frost sect. The difference between Li Fugui's importance to the Golden Frost sect and Wang Tengfei's importance to the Wang clan was immeasurable. Fatty suddenly leaped up onto the table, to the embarrassment of his fellow Golden Frost sect members. They could do little more than cough lightly and watch as he cried out, "Ah, true love. Fellow Taoists, could I really not see such a thing? It was definitely true love. How could I, Li Fugui, do anything to split apart such an affectionate couple? Would I really do that, just for my good-for-nothing friend Wang Tengfei? Would I really disturb a scene of true love? Never. I could never do such a thing. There's a saying which speaks of a love that can transcend something. I forgot. Anyway, someone told me something once. Actually, It was the best friend I've ever had, the person I admire most in the world. He told me that love is the most valuable thing in the world, worth more than even millions of spirit stones. As he spoke, his mouthful of extraordinarily large teeth became visible. In the end, he began to choke up and started to cry aloud. Seeing this caused the Song clan members to smile wryly. The Blood Demon sect cultivators eyed Fatty with strange expressions. Li Shichi frowned, but didn't say anything. Wang Youcai also maintained his silence, although a slight smile appeared on his face. Therefore, continued Fatty, growing more and more excited, I pretended that I didn't even see them. However, it left me with the feeling that Wang Tungfei is really a useless nobody. Furthermore, he's completely shameless. Anyone could see that it was true love. Were I in Wang Tungfei's place, I would simply smile and hand over the beauty. That unknown cultivator, in terms of appearance, of cultivation base, of everything, is clearly above and beyond Wang Tungfei. Sadly, suddenly, an infuriated shout could be heard from mid-air. Li Fugui! Killing intent roiled out from Wang Tungfei as he shot out from the group floating in the air. His entire body was like a sharpened sword slicing toward Li Fugui. Before he could get very close, the Golden Frost sect disciples behind Li Fugui leaped up with amazing speed. In the blink of an eye, they shot forward. One of them, a tall, strapping man, let out a cold harumph and formed a fist, which he lifted into the air. Ripples spread out from it in all directions, and a roaring sound filled the air. Wang Tungfei's facial expression flickered. Wang Shifan exploded out with incredible speed. In an instant, he was in front of Wang Tungfei, waving both hands out forward. A boom echoed out. The blood drained from Wang Shifan's face as he grabbed Wang Tungfei and retreated backward. He glanced back murderously at the large man from the Golden Frost sect. Members of the Wang clan, please conduct yourself with dignity, said the large man coolly. The power of his core formation cultivation base rolled out. The group of people Meng Hao was a part of descended to the ground. Meng Hao had a strange expression on his face, and he coughed lightly. He looked at Fatty hiding behind the large man. The things Fatty had been saying were somewhat embarrassing, and left Meng Hao feeling a little guilty. Do you see, said Chen Fan quietly. Li Fugui is no small figure in the Golden Frost sect. Now that I think about it, Wang Tungfei's current situation really is deserving of sympathy. Little junior brother, have you seen Chu Yuyan? Ari, I'm really curious which sect that cultivator is from who got entangled with fellow Daoist Chu Yuyan. Yeah, I saw her before, said Meng Hao hesitantly, not sure of what else to say. Chen Fan sighed. I really hope I have a chance to meet that guy one day. He must be brilliant to be able to snatch Chu Yuyan away right out from under Wang Tungfei's nose. Ah, such skill. He must truly be a man of character. Such skill, such skill. Meng Hao felt even more guilty. Lowering his head, he slowly edged backward. At the same time, he looked over the crowd. He suddenly noticed Wang Youcai, and he stared in shock. Wang Youcai sat there taciturnly, avoiding Meng Hao's eyes. Wang Tungfei, do you really dare to attack me? Said Fatty, sticking his head out from behind the large man and pointing at Wang Tungfei. Your granny, he roared. You truly dare to attack me? According to the rules of seniority of the 5 sects and 3 clans, I'm your master uncle. Do you actually dare to bully your seniors? Fatty slapped his bag of holding to produce a spirit stone, which he popped into his mouth. Crunching sounds echoed out as he crushed it into bits. It was quite a ferocious sight. After crushing the spirit stone to pieces, Fatty extended his hand. With a wry smile, the big man produced a jade bottle which he handed over to Fatty. Fatty popped it into his mouth. Li Fugui, you are too excessive. Wang Tungfei ground his teeth. Even as the words left his mouth, Fatty closed his eyes. What exists between them is true love, he said. Do you understand what true love is? True love exists between your wife Chu Yuyan and another man. I've seen it with my own eyes. Why would you possibly interfere with that? People around started to laugh, causing Wang Tungfei's face to grow even more enraged. If only you understood. Ah, true love. It's priceless. I truly admire that fellow Daoist. He's so skilled. He truly handled things masterfully. As Fatty went on with his speech, Meng Hao continued to edge backward. However, he wasn't fast enough. He suddenly noticed that Zhu Daya was staring directly at him, a look of disbelief and astonishment covering his face. Meng Hao's heart began to thump. Although he had intentionally set this thing in motion, he had never imagined he would see a scene such as that playing out today. He wanted to hide, but suddenly, Zhu Daya raised his voice. "It's him," he shouted, pointing directly at Meng Hao, seemingly afraid people wouldn't recognize him. "It's him. That's the cultivator who I saw with Chu Yuyan." Zhu Daya really did live up to his name, which means big mouth. Not only did he like to gossip, he also had a very loud voice. His voice rang out clearly, causing everyone's attention to instantly follow the line of his finger to fall onto Meng Hao. Meng Hao's face flickered. The surrounding solitary sword sect disciples stared at him in shock and unconsciously edged away from him. Soon, he and Chen Fan stood there alone. Chen Fan was also gaping numbly at Meng Hao. He recovered his composure quickly, however, in the end, also quickly edged away. He didn't want any misunderstandings to result from standing next to Meng Hao. If anyone tried to bully Meng Hao, he would leap to assist in an instant, but what was occurring right now was a romantic love scandal. As he edged backward, Chen Fan's eyes began to glow brightly. A look of both disbelief and admiration filled them. As Zhu Daya pointed at Meng Hao, all of the solitary sword sect disciples stared at him, as did the cultivators from the Wang clan, the Song clan and the Blood Demon sect. Everyone was looking at Meng Hao. Li Shiqi from the Blood Demon sect had a strange expression on her face. She had noticed Meng Hao moments ago. At the moment, she snorted, turning her head to ignore him. Wang Youcai stared in shock at Meng Hao. As for Wang Tongfei, he stood there mutely, glaring at Meng Hao. Veins began to bulge out on his face, and veins of blood appeared in his eyes. He thought back to the Flying Rain Dragon legacy, to the Reliance Inner Sect training. He thought back to his feelings in the Flying Rain Dragon's cave. His humiliation and rage billowed up to the heavens. Everything was completely silent. All eyes were on Meng Hao. Of course, in the past days, the rumors about Chu Yuyan being seen with a strange man had been spreading throughout the 5 great sects and 3 great clans. It had started in the Golden Frost sect. Everything about the rumor made sense and was quite vivid. No one knew, and everyone wondered, who the strange man might be. Now here, in front of all these eyes, Meng Hao had been pointed out. Fatty stared in shock. He stood blankly for a moment, and then rubbed his eyes vigorously. Suddenly, he started to look very excited. Just as he was about to rush over, a dozen or so colorful beams of light approached from off in the distance. As they whistled down, it was clear that this was the Violet Fate sect. Chu Yuyan was not with them, however, there were 2 people whom Meng Hao did recognize. They were none other than Qian Shuihen and Lu Song. 1. Qian Shuihen and Lu Song were the guys who paid an exorbitant amount of spirit stones and treasures to get Meng Hao's ordinary iron spear. It happened in Chapter 55, Overbearing, who were now in the early Foundation establishment stage. They flew on either side of a young man with a cool expression. His body radiated the power of late Foundation establishment, and seemed to occupy a position of great respect amongst the other Violet Fate sect disciples. At the same time, 10 more beams appeared. This was the Black Civ sect. The beautiful Han Bei, 2. Han Bei's last appearance was in Chapter 164, was among them. She was dressed in men's clothing, but a single glance was enough to see that she was a woman. She was chatting and laughing with a Song clan member as she flew down to the square. The arrival of the Violet Fate sect and Black Civ sect would normally cause various members of other sects to seek out friends and catch up. But a strange atmosphere now filled the air. Most people just glanced momentarily at the new arrivals from the other 2 sects. As soon as Zhu Daya saw more people arriving, he once again cried out, his voice even louder, "It's him. That's the cultivator I saw with Chu Yuyan. She was putting on his clothes." In actuality, there is a vast difference between wearing his clothes and putting on his clothes. The cultivators from the Violet Fate sect all stopped in their tracks and stared at Meng Hao. As disciples of the Violet Fate sect, How could they not be aware of the rumors swirling about regarding Chu Yuyan? As for Chen Shuihen and Lu Song, the instant they caught sight of Meng Hao, their eyes grew wide and they stared in shock. Then their eyes grew hateful. It had been years since they had seen Meng Hao, but the blow they had received that year was enormous. Even down to this very day, people still talked about what had happened. The events had caused hatred to seep down into their bones. It was the greatest humiliation they had ever experienced in their lives. Chen Shuihen stared at Meng Hao, and he started breathing heavily. Killing intent began to roil within Lu Song's eyes. "Damn it, it's you. So, it's you." The two of them roared, filling the spectators with even more shock. The details of the matter with Chu Yuyan were still not clear, but the intense rage of these two Violet Fate sect disciples was clearly no joke. They obviously hated Meng Hao down to the marrow of their bones. This chapter was sponsored by Joseph Aper, Lim Derrick, Gary Cosby, Dewey Suyono, and Vidyapati. Chapter 189. All the enemies arrive. Meng Hao smiled wryly. The spot he occupied in the square had long since grown empty, making him especially conspicuous. His smile grew more bitter, and he sighed inwardly. If I had known things would end up like this, he thought, I wouldn't have let Ju Daya go. Ari, are all of my enemies going to appear today? He coughed and subconsciously rubbed his nose. He suddenly got the feeling that he'd done a bit too many things over the past few years. Now the moment had arrived in which his crowds of victims were accusing him. "Damn you, Meng Hao," howled Chen Shuihen. "I will never forget the matter of the iron spear from that year." He immediately took a step forward. Next to him, Lu Song's eyes were red. Throughout the years, the two of them were often derided by fellow sect members because of the incident with the iron spear. They had often wished to go seek Meng Hao to exact revenge. However, the state of Zhao had disappeared, presumably Meng Hao along with it. They had never imagined that they would encounter him this day. Thoughts of vengeance immediately filled their hearts. Wang Tongfei also took a step forward, his face filled with murder. "Meng Hao, I already loathed you back in the state of Zhao. You had better provide an explanation about what happened with Chu Yuyan." Wang Tongfei felt as if he were an object of laughter among the entire current generation of cultivators of the southern domain. It was something he couldn't accept. He wanted to slay Meng Hao where he stood. "What a lively scene, Brother Meng," came a voice from within the Black Civ sect disciples. It was Han Bei. "I never imagined I would find you here. So many interesting stories." She sighed. "Don't forget the deal you and I made." She covered her mouth and laughed, winking at Meng Hao. Her words made the audience's eyes glitter even more brightly. Meng Hao's appearance seemed to be provoking the interest of one person after another. As of now, all the people who had never heard of him before were becoming intensely interested in the proceedings. A buzz of conversation filled the air. One voice rose up from within the Blood Demon sect. It was Li Shichi. "Fellow Daoist Meng Hao, you really do have a lot of interesting stories to tell. However, I'm curious about what happened to that annoying hat of yours." It was hard to tell what she was thinking, but her eyes shone with interest. Chen Fen stood gaping. He took a deep breath as he gazed at Meng Hao, an indescribable admiration growing in his eyes. Fatty looked at Meng Hao excitedly. It seemed that no matter where Meng Hao went, he would attract attention. It was the same back in the Reliance sect as it was right here and now. No wonder he's the elder brother, thought Fatty, taking a deep breath. His admiration for Meng Hao had reached such heights that he wanted to fall to his knees and bow down. Meng Hao gave a dry cough and continued to smile bitterly. He really did feel a bit guilty. However, before he could respond to anyone, 10 beams of light suddenly appeared off in the distance. It was none other than the Li clan. As of now, all 5 great sects and the 2 other great clans had arrived. In the middle of the Li clan people was Li Daoyi, 1. Li Daoyi's last appearance was in chapter 134, 8th Demon Sealing Hex. His arm had long since been replaced by the Li clan. He was a Dao child, so he couldn't marry into the Song clan. He had obviously not come because of the Song clan's search for a husband, but rather for some other reason. However, as soon as the Li clan people touched down into the square, his eyes fell upon Meng Hao. As soon as they did, he gaped. Almost immediately, his cultivation base rippled with power, and the aura of the great circle of late Foundation establishment filled the square. "So, you finally appear," he said grimly, taking a step toward Meng Hao. Fierce killing intent emanated from his eyes. It was obvious to everyone that there was some big secret between him and Meng Hao that he wasn't willing to talk about. Of course, their fight in the Blood Immortal Legacy tournament had given birth to enormous enmity that could only be wiped away by death. To suddenly find Meng Hao here caused Li Daoi's killing intent to explode outward. Everyone else in the square who didn't know Meng Hao were now clamoring in excitement and shock at what was happening. First it was the matter with Chu Yuyan and then Wang Tongfei's murderous intentions. Then something about the Violet Fate sect and an iron spear. After that, some agreement between him and Han Bei from the Black Sieve sect. Next, Li Shiqi from the Blood Demon sect. And finally, his provoked killing intent from the Dao child of the Li clan. How can this guy have gotten involved in so many situations? He seems to have provoked everybody. How come we've never heard of him before? What's going on? His name is Meng Hao, huh? It seems like he really has the ability to piss people off. Of the 5 sects and 3 clans, the only ones who aren't involved are the Solitary Sword sect and the Song clan. He arrived with the Solitary Sword sect, so he must not have any issues with them. But what about the Song clan? He's so good at pissing people off, I wonder if he had any issues with them. Amidst the buzz of conversation that filled the square, Fatty let out a roar and charged up to Meng Hao's side, his face filled with excitement. "Meng Hao, I've missed you to death," he said. He hugged Meng Hao, tears streaming down his face. Years had passed, and he had grown up quite a bit. He was now much stouter than before. Meng Hao smiled, although the smile was somewhat bitter. Everything that was happening was actually because of Fatty. "Meng Hao, you will give me an explanation." Wang Tongfei's face was extremely grim as he stared at Meng Hao. Wang Tongfei felt as if he were wearing an enormous green hat, too. As I mentioned in a previous footnote, the green hat is a symbol in Chinese culture which implies you're being cheated on. More information here, which filled his heart with indescribable humiliation. He took another step toward Meng Hao. Li Daoi also took a step forward. "You still haven't provided an explanation for what happened that day. Now that you're here, you have an opportunity to speak. Damn you, Meng Hao, we will resolve our enmity this day." Chen Shuihen and Lu Song both began to walk toward him. It seemed chaos would break out at any moment. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. Fatty spun and let out a roar. "Meng Hao is my brother. Who dares to attack him?" Hearing this, the Golden Frost sect disciples exchanged glances and then strode over to stand next to Fatty. The big man from before simply shook his head, choosing not to say anything. Fatty's sudden appearance next to Meng Hao caused Wang Tongfei to frown. Chen Fan strode forward. "Meng Hao is my little junior brother. Fellow Taoists, if you insist on acting this way, then I, Chen Fan, must also take my stand." Suddenly, his flying dagger appeared. The addition of Chen Fan caused Chen and Lu from the Violet Fate sect to hesitate. Han Bei moved forward with a laugh. "Brother Meng, considering our friendship, how could I not join you as well?" Without a single word, Wang Youcai stood up in the midst of the Blood Demon sect cultivators and walked over to stand next to Meng Hao. Li Shiqi's cold voice rang out next. "Your hat is incredibly annoying. However, for the sake of my junior brother Wang Youcai, the Blood Demon sect will also stand by you. Let's see who dares to touch you this day." The crowd of people surrounding Meng Hao caused Li Daoi's brow to furrow. It was a delicate situation. In actuality, there could not be any killing on this day and place, considering they were in the Song clan. Also, he had never imagined Meng Hao would have so many powerful connections. The Golden Frost sect, the Solitary Sword sect, the Blood Demon sect, the Black Sieve sect. People from all of these sects supported him. Wang Tungfei's eyes shone with a cold light as he glared murderously at Meng Hao. Shock filled his heart. How could he ever have predicted that this former disciple of the Reliance sect could have accumulated such influence? There was Chen Fan and Li Fugui. Add to that Han Bei from the Black Sieve sect and Li Shiqi from the Blood Demon sect. Who knew why they all supported him, but without uttering a single word, Meng Hao had suddenly made it impossible for anyone to attack him. Qian Shuihen and Lu Song were suddenly very nervous. They, too, could never have imagined that after all these years, Meng Hao would reappear in such a fashion, with such connections. The entire square grew silent, and it was at this moment that an impatient voice suddenly could be heard from off in the distance. "What are you kids up to? What's riled everyone up? Everybody simmer down. The Song clan is throwing a feast to search for a husband. Why is everyone stirring up trouble?" The voice belonged to eccentric Song, who was accompanied by the eccentric members of the other sects and clans. Smiles covered their faces, and they obviously didn't care about what was happening. The appearance of the old-timers caused the tension in the square to begin to dissipate. Everyone began to return to their original positions. As they did, Meng Hao lowered his head and began to walk away with Chen Fan. Suddenly, eccentric Song's eyes fell upon Meng Hao. "Hold on," he said. Meng Hao froze, sighing inwardly. With a silent, bitter laugh, he turned to face eccentric Song. His mind spun as he tried to think of a way out of the situation. He placed his hand on his bag of holding. If necessary, he would try to use the good luck charm to escape. "Kid, why do you look so familiar?" Eccentric Song's brow furrowed. "Elder Song, sir," cried Lu Song, "this is the person from the state of Jiao with the iron spear." As soon as he heard the word, eccentric Song's eyes went wide. He stared at Meng Hao. "So, it's you, you little brat." When they heard the words, the surrounding cultivators gasped. Previously they thought that the Song clan was the only one Meng Hao hadn't offended. One and all looked at Meng Hao with admiration in their eyes. Meng Hao hadn't managed to offend someone from the junior generation of the Song clan, but instead, a nascent soul eccentric. Meng Hao smiled, clasping his hands and bowing toward eccentric Song. Meng Hao of the junior generation extends greetings to Master Song of the elder generation. Senior, your cultivation base is extraordinary, your demeanor heavenly in nature. That year, I of the junior generation was ignorant and foolish. Senior, you have noble character and sterling integrity. I truly hope that on this joyous occasion for the Song clan, you will not cause difficulties for the junior generation. Eccentric Song gave Meng Hao a long, meaningful look. Although he didn't say anything, sometimes, you can speak volumes without saying a single word. Wang Tungfei's eyes glittered, and he took another step toward Meng Hao. "Elder Song," he said, "there is enmity between I of the junior generation and this person. He humiliated my intended beloved. In the presence of all the various fellow Taoists, I implore you to permit me to put an end to the enmity this day." Meanwhile, in the towering castle in the Song clan capital city, Song Jiao was looking at a glittering screen upon which played out the scene from down below. A smile covered her face, and it seemed she was paying close attention to Meng Hao's scholarly figure. "What an interesting person," she said with a laugh. "How could he possibly have offended so many people, even uncle?" The middle-aged woman standing next to her also laughed, and a warm expression appeared on her face. "Why, have you taken a fancy to him?" This chapter was sponsored by TF. Chapter 190, Respected Senior. "No," said Song Jiao quickly, her face reddening a bit. She was innately beautiful, and had a tender personality. The woman next to her laughed, looking at her lovingly. She didn't say anything. Her voice light, Song Jiao continued, "I just think he's interesting. He offended so many people, and yet so many people are willing to stand by his side. Also, he doesn't really look like a cultivator. He looks more like a scholar." The middle-aged woman laughed again, and her expression grew even more gentle. She lifted her right hand, and a flaming jade slip appeared. It burned into nothing, and suddenly, a slight tremble ran through all of the mountains in the Song clan. The tremble was so minor that anyone under the nascent soul stage wouldn't notice it. Up in the dark sky, the moon shimmered. Within the moon, countless magical symbols appeared that seemed to be deducing matters pertaining to both the past and the future. After a long moment, they faded away. It was then that in front of the middle-aged woman, time seemed to move in reverse. The jade slip seemed to burn as it reappeared in front of her. Song Jiao watched this happen, not with surprise, but with anticipation. "All right," said the woman, pressing her finger onto the jade slip. "Let me take a look at the past of this person you find so interesting." As soon as she pushed down on the jade slip, it projected a screen into the air. On it could be seen a small county, and a boy sitting next to a window. He was reading a scroll by lamplight. As he read, he slowly shook his head and fanned himself with a feather fan. It was obviously summer. The boy was none other than Meng Hao. The screen flickered, and Meng Hao was now wearing a neat, clean scholar's robe. He walked out of his house and stood up against a nearby wall, looking a bit shifty-eyed. Soon, a sedan emerged from the courtyard opposite him. He craned his neck to look at it, an excited expression on his face. 1. In case you forgot about the sedan scenario, it was alluded to in Chapter 45, a look back at the mortal world after 3 years. The screen shimmered, and now Meng Hao stood on top of Mount Daking. He sighed and tossed a gourd bottle down into the river. 2. The scene from Mount Daking was obviously in Chapter 1, Scholar Meng Hao. Next, he was in the Reliance sect, holding aloft a medicinal pill, face filled with anxiety as he gave the pill away. 3. The scene of giving away the medicinal pill was from Chapter 5, This Kid Isn't Bad. When Song Jiao saw this, she laughed out loud. The middle-aged woman smiled and shook her head. The next image was of Meng Hao's shop on the plateau, and his shy, bashful smile as he sold medicinal pills at exorbitant rates. 4. Meng Hao's business schemes were in Chapter 11, Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet, as well as subsequent chapters. There were many images from that time, but they suddenly flashed by quickly, making it difficult to make everything out quickly. The middle-aged woman frowned, seemingly lost in thought. The next image that Song Jiao saw was that of eccentric Song on the mountaintop and Meng Hao running along with the iron spear. She saw Meng Hao in the City of Cultivators and the deal he made with Lu and Song for the spear. After that were all the bloody events that resulted. Song Jiao couldn't stop laughing. This Meng Hao is awful, he's nothing like a scholar. She continued to watch, her laughter causing her eyes to look like 2 crescent moons. The images again became somewhat blurry. By this time, he was in the southern domain. However, in this instant, the jade slip suddenly began to crumble into pieces. In the blink of an eye, it was covered with cracks. A woman's cold snort could be heard from very far off in the distance. It filled, not only the room, but the entire Song clan. The middle-aged woman's face filled with shock, and she coughed up a mouthful of blood. She grabbed the astonished Song Jiao and staggered backward several paces, a look of disbelief covering her face. All of the mountains within the Song clan began to tremble. As they did, the moon in the sky above the Song clan suddenly exploded with a blinding light. It was a flash that instantly began to tremble and darken, as if it were being forcefully suppressed by someone. At this same moment, the seemingly endless mountains of the Song clan continued to tremble, and then, one by one, the mountains suddenly sank down an entire inch, as if they were being pushed down by some incredible force. That inch seemed to be a warning, some demonstration of power by someone. This person seemed to be saying that if they wished, they could wipe out the entire Song clan mountain range. At the same time, all of the nascent soul cultivators began to tremble and spit up blood. Deep within the Song clan mountains, near the location of their Dao reserves, a roaring sound rose up. It didn't disseminate outward, and only certain people could sense it. In the deepest, most remote location within the Song clan mountains, was a stone pillar. Atop the pillar was a corpse, or rather, half of a corpse. The bottom half was nowhere to be seen. The corpse's eyes suddenly snapped open, whereupon the aura of the peak Dao seeking stage exploded out. The corpse trembled, as if it couldn't stand up to the immense power which was bearing down upon the Song clan. Respected senior, calm your anger. The Song clan of the southern domain is at fault. If you know you are at fault, then correct it, came the transmitted voice of a woman. She was clearly irritated. Your Song clan has the tradition of marrying daughters? I suggest she be a maidservant. The corpse hesitated. Respected senior. What was that? You know, the Song clan of the Eastern lands desire this honor but are unable to achieve it. Do you truly dare to refuse me? As the woman's voice transmitted out, the entire Song clan mountains suddenly shook and sank down 3 more inches. Without hesitation, the corpse said, "Respected senior, we shall do as you bid." The woman's voice faded away. At the same moment, back in the capital city, Song Jio's face was pale white. Next to her, her mother panted, and blood oozed out from her mouth. "Jiora, this person cannot be provoked. This person is..." Before she could finish speaking, her body began to shake. It seemed as if divine sense were transmitting into her mind. She didn't continue speaking, and eventually looked at pale-faced Song Jio, a complex expression on her face. Everything that had just happened in the Song clan did not go unnoticed by Meng Hao and everyone else. The ground shaking caused everyone's faces to flicker, especially the nascent soul eccentrics. Eccentric Song's body trembled, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. His body continued to tremble, and he coughed up a second mouthful of blood, then a third. In the end, he coughed up a total of 7 mouthfuls of blood. He staggered, his face pale and filled with astonishment. He was the only one in the entire Song clan who coughed up 7 mouthfuls of blood. It was at this moment that the illusory image of a woman appeared in the square, although no one could see it. She stood there, invisible to everyone except for the Song clan's most powerful Dao reserve, the peak Dao seeking corpse. Only he could sense her rippling aura as she arrived at the Song clan square. From the moment she appeared, her eyes were riveted on Meng Hao. They were filled with kindness, tender affection, and love. After a long moment passed, the situation in the square returned to normal. Everyone was shocked, causing a deathly silence to fill the air. The nascent soul cultivators looked around pale-faced. Eccentric Song's face was deathly white. He was scared nearly witless. He wasn't sure what had just happened, nor did he know that the entirety of the Song clan had been shaken just now. Panting, he wiped the blood from his mouth. Suddenly, his body shook as a voice filled his mind. The voice filled him with veneration. It was none other than the spirit-severing stage patriarch of the Song clan. It was clearly a transmission of divine will from the spirit-severing patriarch, who was passing along the orders of the Dao Reserve Corps. All of the nascent soul cultivators of the Song clan received the same message. Meng Hao is not to be provoked. Amidst the silence that covered the square, Wang Tongfei's voice sounded out. Meng Hao, you don't have the qualifications to refuse a battle with me today. He leaped up and began to stride toward Meng Hao, his cultivation base erupting with power. Power exceeding the early foundation establishment stage soared higher and higher. It turned out Wang Tongfei's Dao pillars hummed with the energy of the mid-foundation establishment stage. Meng Hao's eyes flickered as he watched Wang Tongfei approach. Wang Tongfei's right hand lifted up. Black tendrils rose up and circulated around his finger. His eyes were calm. In the Reliance sect of the state of Jiao, you stole my belongings and wrested away my position in the inner sect. In the southern domain, you insulted me. Do you really think you qualify to be the archenemy of Wang Tongfei? His hair whipped madly around his head and a mysterious black glow began to emanate from his poison finger. You don't deserve to be Wang Tongfei's archenemy. You were an insect back then, and you're still an insect today. Today, you shall be a blood sacrifice to my poison finger. Wang Tongfei's words echoed throughout the square. Are you finished? Said Meng Hao coolly. He strode forward, lifting his right hand and striking it out. The power of his 4 perfect Dao pillars congealed into the palm. Not a strand leaked out. A roaring filled the air as he struck toward Wang Tongfei. As the boom filled the square, the surrounding cultivators watched, completely focused on what was happening. Only Han Bei and Li Shiqi, as well as Chen Fan, looked with strange expressions toward the blustering Wang Tongfei. Fatty looked extremely nervous. The large man from the Golden Frost sect was holding him back, otherwise he would have joined Meng Hao to fight. Amidst the roaring boom, Wang Tongfei tumbled backward, blood spraying from his mouth. The palm blow just now had actually not been a level strike, but a slap. The sound of the slap rang out as some of Wang Tungfei's teeth shattered. He flopped backward, an expression of shock on his face. Impossible! Meng Hao strode forward after him, striking with his hand again. A boom sounded out, and more blood sprayed from Wang Tungfei's mouth. This time, the slap struck the other side of his face. Impossible! Wang Tungfei's face was pale, and his eyes filled, not with confusion, but frenzied rage. He was no longer shocked or frightened. His humiliation washed away everything. He stared murderously at Meng Hao and then howled. At the same time, Wang Shifan began to move forward, as did the frowning old nascent soul cultivator from the Wang clan. But then, eccentric Song's eyes flickered. A look of discomfort and even disbelief covered his face as he reached out to prevent both of them from doing anything.